Our next session, the last session at the summit, an uphill sprint going global. I would like to welcome the moderator, Borko Handjiski. He's the head of strategic projects and policies at Abu Dhabi Department of Finance and member of the board of directors at Macedonia 2025. Borko, welcome, and the panelists.
We can start. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for staying for this last session, hopefully last but not least. We are going to be talking about going global. All successful small open economies have relied on exports to drive their economic development. If you look at Singapore, Luxembourg, Ireland today, their exports are over 100% of GDP. If you look at some of the most successful Central European economies, Slovenia, Estonia, Czech Republic, their exports are around 80% of GDP. Exports and trade for small countries are not just a source of growth, they are also a source of survival. To quote a minister in the Singapore government, trade is vital for Singapore's survival. Macedonian economy is small and open, no doubt, and it's actually an economy that knows how to export. Our exports are around 60% of GDP. If you look at them in a nominal number, however, they're about 6 to 7 billion euros. Relatively small if you compare to Slovenia, a country also of 2 million that exports 5 times more. So the purpose of this session today is to showcase that going global is good for business, is good for the economy. And we have, in the panel, we have 2 panelists who represent the tech sector, which by design is a sector that transcends borders. But we also have a representative of the traditional economy, more specifically the construction sector. And we will see that that's also a business that can rely on exports and foreign markets to drive growth. So what I hope from these presentations that our panelists will share is that you in the audience will be motivated to go global, or those who already are global will learn something that will make you better at what you're doing. So we'll start with the big picture view, and then we'll go down to the Macedonian landscape. Relja, big picture view. Okay. Relja has been with 2 of the global tech titans, Microsoft and Google. So Relja, would like to, you've been to Silicon Valley, would like to hear from you, when you looked at the startups in Silicon Valley, what do you see, how they define their geography of focus, how they define what should be going after?
No, that's a really good question, thank you. So I've been doing some advisory roles for both like local startups here and obviously startups in the Bay Area in the States. One thing that pops out is that most startups, if you're looking at a place in the States, they will have a very clear view as to what the product is and what the market is and where the audience is, and they'll try to kind of beeline towards wherever the audience is going to be at. And the reason they do that is because they need to scale, because if you're going to be a successful startup, you need to have a 10x, 100x, 1000x plan of growth. When I compare and contrast that to most, not all, people I talk to here, and when I say here, I mean like broadly the region, I don't mean Macedonia in particular. One thing I've noticed is this reluctance to kind of go abroad and to expand views and go, hey, why, what's the biggest audience we can address? And the way that pops up is that, look, if you have a market of, let's say, a couple million people, and if your best possible shot is to, target 1% of the market, at the end of the day, that's going to be a very small number, right? So what I really encourage people to do is to just think of like whatever product it is they're building, to try to see how that would play in a much larger market. That could be, EU, could be US, could be, maybe even China one day, and then see how to break into that, and then effectively do what Ilir, who was sitting like right here just before us, was saying, which is basically targeting a much larger market from over here, and that's how you get like the best efficiencies. And kind of last note on that. If you rewind back 2 days, so I think when they were opening up the summit, the prime ministers were talking about the Open Balkans initiative and the idea of like, hey, can we create like an 11 million person market as opposed to like multiple tiny 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 million person markets. So yeah, that's the focus is to just figure out where the audience is and try to get to it as quick as you can.
Clear, thank you. Now if we go to the Macedonian experiences, Gogo, you've been the COO of Southeast European University's Tech Park. You've worked with a lot of startups. What are the lessons learned from the successful startups that have Macedonian startups that have gone global? And what would be the advice to give to the audience?
Yeah, thanks for having me first. Actually, yeah, we were operating for more than 10 years. We had a lot of success stories and a lot of startups mentoring and giving them growth opportunities for them. But it's not about one single thing that needs to be, let's say, pre-fulfilled in order to have a successful startup for Macedonia. Of course, it has to be the founder, the vision, the mission, but it also refers to the team and to the potential. I would say that leadership, growth, like previous panel says, sales and negotiation skills are pretty crucial. A lot of people think that if you have a startup, the idea or your personal idea is your most unique asset. But actually, at the beginning, yes. But eventually, when you're entering growth phase and entering new markets, it's a lot about people. It's a lot about negotiations, selling skills. It's a lot about leveraging different thinking on operational level that makes you pretty unique, but also makes you a professional in a business way. So if you want to be a global conqueror, you have to pretty have your hands-on approach on operational level, and you have to have these extra skills. And these kind of skills are more on the growth stage than on a startup stage.
And Gogo, to make this more tangible, would you be able to share an example of a company or two that has made it, succeeded, and what were some of the best practices that they applied in order to succeed in global markets? I mean, we just heard the amazing story of Slice from Ilir. Any other success that you can share?
Yeah, really stories is quite motivational. We also have some success stories from our region that has been positively influenced to the tech park and to other young people. For example, Marseco, which is an IT company that targets the DACH region. Actually, they're in the HR sector in using artificial intelligence. And they quite targeted this region because of the corporates. And their success story pretty much resonates in finding local investors from that region that open new doors and opportunities for them. And they managed to develop or perfectionize their software and getting their first clients. Another story would be Hotel Key that manages actually the software behind some of the greatest chains of hospitality and tourism hotels. And some of them, Inspire 11, Adeva IT, which tackles mostly IT professional and talented people everywhere. Their go-to strategy was actually the bootstrap the first year and then eventually opened a sales office in the United States and took it from there.
Excellent. Hope we'll hear more of those stories. Now, this is not just about tech world going global. It's also about the traditional economy going global. Dusko is a VP at Adora Business Group. Very successful company established on the Macedonian market, but we will actually talk about their successes abroad. So, Dusko, how important are foreign markets for Adora's success to date, but also for your future business plans?
So, good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, I would like to briefly congratulate the whole team of Macedonia 2025 for the outstanding organization for the past 2 days and the quality of discussion we were able to witness and all together generate. So it's truly an honor and pleasure for me, so thank you for that. So to get to the point, Borko, quite honestly speaking, foreign markets have been, and in fact they still are, only, let's say, a marginal part of Adora's total business activity and revenue generation. So in other words, we can simply say in a way that we are just scratching the surface in terms of foreign markets. So in 2015, we started business activity in the Middle East, Dubai more precisely. We are based in Dubai. The business was not a real estate development, it was something else, so it can be seen as tackling a foreign market, but in a sense also a business diversification. So although that business was very proactive, very innovative, very useful and meaningful knowledge generating for us, if we are talking in terms of business size, it represents only a small fraction of what we were able to do for the past 7 or 8 years, let's say, in our domestic activities. Then in 2020, motivated by few long-lasting unfavorable factors, unfortunately, in the domestic real estate development scene, which obviously it's our core business, we decided to go do some real estate in Serbia. So for the past 2 years, we can say that we had significant operations in Serbia, and we are very, very happy for that. However, again, if we compare the size of business we were able to produce there compared to our full potential that we were doing in Macedonia for the past 20 years, it's still not on par, if you get me. However, that business has a huge value for us, and it is something that we would definitely like to invest more of our focus and energy in the future within the same. So to further answer your question about our long-term business strategy, unfortunately, I have to say that due to the global uncertainty that prevailing right now globally, and especially in the context of our region, our long-term business strategy, probably it's a bit flexible, and probably, unfortunately, it's a bit more conservative of what we intended to be and what we would have want to see. In other words, we have to be careful given the global circumstances. However, surely I have to say that foreign markets and international expansion is something that is on top, not on top, but it has a high priority on our agenda list, and it is something that we want to invest further energy and resources into. I personally believe, and the rest of the management and team of Adora shares the same opinion, that, foreign markets are a great way of organic and sustainable business growth. They're excellent source of innovation and knowledge for a company. And what was very relevant to our case, and what I was able to see in our company, is that when we enter foreign market, there is this need to further excel, to inner improve, and there is this constant need to get creative on whole new levels within the company. That's something that's needed when you go in a foreign market. So yeah, to wrap it up, I would say that opportunities outside the Macedonian borders are something that we want to explore significantly in the future, and I think it is worthy.
Thank you, Dusko. So thank you for sharing that in your context it was the challenges on the domestic market that pushed you. This is not the first company that goes global because of that reason, but it should not be the only reason. And the lesson learned that Dusko just shared proves that ultimately going global does make you a better company, even domestically. I will do another round of questions for the panelists, but also please send questions through the Slido app, and I will be more than happy to pass them on to the panelists. So maybe to go back to Relja. Relja, from your experience working with the large tech players, are there any lessons learned for small companies that you would like to share?
Yeah, for sure. And this is actually one of the things I find very interesting, is in that there's basically patterns and anti-patterns, right? And some things that large tech companies do make a lot of sense, and we should try to replicate them in smaller entities. A good example is having a solid mission and something people can rally behind and understand, or focusing on like top-notch recruiting and really caring about the people, or building a strong culture. Those are all things that big companies tend to be really good at. Now, you could argue that a smaller, tighter knit group of people can have a strong culture than a big giant company, but where the big companies excel is having a reproducible way of rolling out that culture site over site over site across many teams. The anti-patterns are all probably more interesting to me because I think that's where people start going awry. One thing you notice is that the large companies tend to have at least one vastly profitable, line of business, which then funds a lot of other things. And what that means is that sometimes you'll find smaller companies or startups trying to emulate that behavior where they're like, oh, look, this big giant company has just started to use, maybe it's some new framework, or they're investing in a metaverse, or pick a favorite topic, and they'll try to replicate that behavior without realizing that that's only possible if you have extremely large, revenue per employee and profit per employee. Yeah, then you get to do things on the side. But smaller companies need to be super focused and really they're laser focused on what they're trying to accomplish. So that's, again, this is, as companies grow, clearly they need to open up new lines of business, clearly they need to find ways of being more, investable, they need to find ways of, driving up their, PE and so on, just to make sure they can actually raise more money and offer more returns to existing investors. So they have to do some of the, crazy stuff that's out there. But that balance is really tricky to get. So what I usually tell people is yes, focus on recruiting, focus on mission, focus on culture, focus on, building solid practices, but don't go overboard in, for example, on the tech side, I'm CTO, so more of the engineering side, don't go overboard on the, latest, greatest framework you've just heard of something, or something that's happening, some new thing they're rolling out at a conference, because that is probably not mission critical. That is probably not going to be materially helping out your customers, and those are the people you want to go after. So, I would say it's you have to look at both the pros and the cons and pick which of those you want to emulate and where you want to do something different.
Clear. Thank you, Relja. So focus and getting the best possible people behind you to deliver on that, mission.
Absolutely.
Clear. Gogo, to go back to the experience of running a tech park and supporting startups across the board, what are some of the critical enablers that you've seen have specifically been helpful in the startups that you've worked with to succeed?
Yeah, so basically we as a society, as a nation, are very good at technical skills. So basically, if we want to start a new product or a service, we are very good at creating those products or services or digital services in this context and try to conquer the Europe or the world. But we are very lacking this growth or business or soft skills that actually are needed for a business to grow internationally. So I would like to emphasize this, that we are mostly focused on a startup creation and not so on the startup growth. And this you can learn on schools or universities or let's say formal programs. This is a growth mentality that we should be focusing on long terms. And I don't want to talk about it because it's a separate team altogether. But yeah, I would like to see more of the growth and sales mentality in Macedonian startups, so they can move things faster and be ready to grow faster, but also attract investors. I would say that the sales skills, the negotiation skills, financial literacy, and probably access to finance is the most great enablers to see the startup industry moving faster altogether. Actually, in Startup Macedonia, which is the umbrella organization that we measure some KPIs, and we did frequent research of the Macedonian startup ecosystem, and it shows us that we're moving in the right direction. So for the past 5 to 8 years, we did this relevant questions and surveys about the Macedonian startup ecosystem, and it showed us that more and more startups are created, more quality startups are created. They're being profitable earlier in the lifetime, which is good, and attracting more investors with bigger tickets, which is also good. What they say that they're lacking is actually this access to finance, sales skills from young people that can push things together. But this is not only Macedonian problem, it's more like a regional problem altogether in the Balkan region. But I would definitely say that we have now more opportunities than threats. We are building capacities of the ecosystem and the startup themselves to push these limits. And probably we'll have the next unicorn, Macedonian unicorn in the next 5 to 10 years, because investors are also tapping on this market, searching for good ideas and good startups that can eventually, they can buy them earlier and cheaper and then sell them later on with higher value.
Clear. Thank you, Gogo. So we are not talking about problems in the panel, only about opportunities. So the opportunity that I heard is invest in learning how to sell, and that will get your good product sold more at a better price. So now a question for Dusko from the audience. Serbia has experienced a lot of real estate development in recent years. Do you see a similar potential in Macedonia, including in the tourism sector?
Well, definitely yes. The answer is a definite yes. First of all, I would like to say that Macedonia had and experienced a huge real estate development over the past 10 or 15 years. In fact, Adora itself has constructed, executed projects over 400,000 square meters, so which is respectable number for the size of our country. And definitely yes. I'm trying to focus more on the opportunities within the chat. So definitely, yes, we can get back on track with real estate development as soon as we solve some of the local issues that unfortunately we are facing for a few years until now.
Clear, thank you. Please also feel free to write more questions for the panelists, to the audience. To go back, Relja, to you, I mentioned your previous experiences,
right,
but not your current role. Relja is currently in a non-profit organization that tries to build and share technologies for the betterment of everyone. Could you tell us a bit more, and what are the opportunities to create value in a non-profit in a tech space?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm with MLCommons. We are a nonprofit that's backed by basically the large tech companies. So if you think of it as, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Meta, Samsung, Qualcomm, and so on. And what we do is we do the parts of machine learning that are really just honestly making the world a better place and probably don't need to be monetized. So a good example of that is if you think about medical machine learning, usually you'll have some sort of like an ML model that's good at, I don't know, let's say detecting tumors on CAT scans or MRI scans. Well, the problem is that right now we have PhD researchers who just don't have access to patient data because of all the patient privacy laws, which is, that's a good thing. We like patient privacy. So what we work on is really a platform that lets researchers take their ML model, send it over to a hospital, have that ML model run on whatever hardware is available at a hospital, which usually isn't particularly amazing, and have it train there and get better at whatever it's trying to do, whether it's classifying MRI scans or what have you, and then come back to the researcher, right? So we ran a pilot, some hospital in Massachusetts, and basically, think of a world where today, if you are a medical researcher, you kind of need to have a hospital you're working with, or a particular, doctor, or a particular department you're working with, to try to get maybe some percentage of their patients to actually, open up their data so you can train your ML models. But imagine a world in which, because patient data never leaves the hospital building, you can now have any PhD researcher, or like any researcher anywhere, train up a model, upload it, and have it be run against actual patient data, and hopefully get a lot better in diagnosing a lot of things that are out there. And that's actually something that makes me feel really, really good. That's one of our working groups. Another one, I'm not going to go on a whole list, we have 14 of them, but another one that's kind of really fast is, your phone in your pocket, it has a machine learning accelerator chip in it, most likely. And if it doesn't today, it will in a year or two. And if we can make, the 5 or 6 billion smartphones out there, just like, 2 or 3% more efficient in running machine learning tasks, okay, each phone doesn't consume that much power, but, multiplied by 6 billion. And if you make that 2% more efficient, hey, guess what? All of a sudden, that actually does move some needles somewhere. So those are all examples of things that you can do from being a nonprofit, because you're not running into the various barriers of, look, I like profit. In a previous life, I was very much a part of the profit-making industry, but it's really nice to not have to be running into those walls and just do things that actually make the world a better place.
And a follow-up, how does one run a nonprofit for the founders, the funders?
Yeah, the funders. Well, the funders are, again, the tech companies. It's, see if I get this in the right order. I think it's Google, Microsoft, Amazon. I'm gonna get it wrong, but we have 40 backers on our website, MLCommons.org. And again, and they're not only funding us in terms of, okay, there's actual money to hire some staff and whatnot, they're also devoting really high-end engineering resources from the various teams. We have a total of, I would probably say, about between 100 and 200 volunteers from top tech companies that are volunteering time to the organization, and then like another 15 or so team members, just geographically distributed. So in terms of the raw talent and firepower, we have a lot of it, and I'm really, really grateful for that. So big thank you. And that's what makes a difference, right? And then for each of those individual companies, they don't want to be in the business of like, hey, we're going to make some money off your cancer scan. Like that's not great. They don't want to be in the business of trying to force their frameworks down on everybody else. So they're being a nonprofit that's industry backed that just tries to make things better. Seems to be in the everyone's interest.
Clear, thanks. So hearing your story, Relja, even a non-profit can be a good business idea if there is an idea that can be funded by somebody who is willing to help in that particular area.
And I think kind of goes back to the point you made about there being really good talent here. That is a competitive advantage for the region. So we should make the most of it, and we should find ways of placing the talent both in the for-profit sector and the nonprofit sector and what have you. And I think the nonprofit sector probably doesn't get as much attention over here for understandable reasons, right? But I'm hoping that's something we can address over time and we get better at.
Thank you. A question from the audience. Gogo, this one goes best to you maybe. When are we going to expect more private investors to invest in pre-seed startups with bigger ticket items like more than $100,000, I guess, in Macedonia?
Yeah, actually, that's a very good question, and I want to use this opportunity to say that we as a SEEUTechPark will also co-invest from this fall into startups. Probably we'll be writing tickets up to 50K, but we also want to co-invest. That means for us that we want to be the first institutional investor in the pre-seed or seed stage. But we also want to, let's say, leverage the private investors or the business angels that want to invest into startups. So we'll kind of walk the walk with them and help them to give them these kind of tools like valuations, like due diligence, IP, intellectual property protection that can we can share the know-how that we have gained with our local investors. So these kind of local investors, some of them are experienced, some of them are first-timers, but the passion and the industry focus that they might have may help a lot of Macedonian startups and tech companies actually perform better than without them. So we're putting money and the know-how into this perspective. And on a general terms, yeah, there are a lot of VCs. Actually, around 13 new VC funds from last year, new VC funds are having their focus on Eastern Europe and the Balkans, only from last year. The most performing return of investment VC actually focuses on Eastern Europe. So I will be expecting in the next 5 to 6 years more VCs and private equity investors tapping into this market, because there's a upscale on this on the long run. But we also want to enable Macedonian investors that want to invest or co-invest. We want to help them seize this opportunity, not just for emotional reasons or for personal reasons, but for professional or financial reasons also.
Clear. So,
Hey, can I jump in on this? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
I'm not
okay.
breaking rules? Okay, good.
No rules.
This is from purely anecdotal. This is from my own visa. Like, I'm based up in Serbia, right? And one thing I'm noticing is that sort of angel investor class is, I wouldn't say missing, but it's significantly smaller than you would expect it to be. I think awareness of what is even angel investing is just extremely low. And again, if I look at people who would otherwise, might be angel investors if they were based in the States, they're like off buying their fourth condo and the 18th garage to rent out, right? Because that's like if you look at where do people place their, wealth here, most often it's being real estate, which, that's a good thing. We like real estate. I'm not saying that's bad, right?
You should.
Exactly. Everyone, get your third condo. No, but it would be, I think it would be in a better world if we had more, I think it's a financial education and just make it more accessible and more ways for people to find out about angel investing and try to get it to pull in. So like, hey, maybe you can divert some of the real estate money, again, no offense, to startups. And I think that class is really should exist. The funding is there, but it just doesn't for most educational reasons. And I think that's something we should address.
So for the startups in the audience looking for those 100K, convince somebody not to buy a third apartment, or go after the VCs that Gogo mentioned that are regional, but also looking at the Balkan and the Macedonian market. A question for Dusko from the audience. Do you see potential in any new technologies as support for going global in your industry?
Real estate development. I want to just recall the previous question that you asked me, because I then remember that I didn't answer it correctly about the tourism potential. So, yeah, whoever asked this, according to me, Macedonia has a huge tourism potential, but we have to see a bit of investment from both sides. I mean, the private sector and the government sector. I relate to our story in Zlatibor, for example, our project in Serbia in Zlatibor. We sold it in a record time. Almostly, we were able to achieve a price of maybe 3 to 4 times what would you achieve compared to Macedonia. But at the same time in Zlatibor last year, there was the longest cable car in the world. It was just open, so obviously that has some effect on our sales and our projects and the demand. So if we see more of these projects here by the local authorities, then the private sector can support it. If we are talking about new technologies, how can they help us as real estate developers? I mean, definitely, I don't think that technology is that applicable in our sector, compared to the tech sector or like any other of these, IT sectors. However, there are constantly new technologies that improve the process of construction and make the job to us as developers, as investors in real estate construction easier. For example, like now we have softwares. I personally have a software that I track from lifetime, like how the project progresses and all the hiccups, all the setbacks. Like we have constantly new new ways of doing the projects, which obviously improve the sector and make for us and investors to run the business, not necessarily being present on the project site.
Here, thank you, Dusko. Another question from the audience. I'll leave it open if any of you would like to answer. Macedonia is currently experiencing a high inflation rate of about 10%. Do you believe that boosting FDI would only exacerbate the problem?
Can you repeat the question, sorry?
Given the current context of high inflation,
okay,
would more FDI make the problem of inflation worse for those living in the country?
I mean, I guess it depends on the amount of FDI you're getting, right? I mean, if there's enough FDI coming in that it actually materially impacts inflation, that actually kind of doesn't sound that bad. It sounds like a lot of inflation coming in. Oh, I'm sorry, a lot of investment coming in.
Would you see inflation affecting in any way the tech startups?
Well, yes and no. Concerning your question, I'm pretty much that we don't need only FDI as a financial component, but we kind of need it as a transfer of knowledge and capacity to our companies and latest technologies and, let's say, management and operation opportunities. So, yeah, in this matter, I'm very pro of it. Regarding the inflation, I'm not an expert on it, so I cannot comment more deeply. But yeah, probably it will affect all industries, in all sectors. The tech industry also, like every single event might do so, like the recession or let's say the war in Ukraine. It will have global effect, but if it's a short term, I would say that it can be achievable, easy, but if it's here to stay, it will create different problems.
Here. One final question, given that our special guest speaker, that His Excellency the President will be closing the event. It's an important one about IP rights in the tech industry. So how important is the protection of IP rights for startups?
Let me start with just briefly. IP rights, I think, are the most valuable assets in the startup industry. So if you're a startup tech company, you don't have much as your chairs, your desk, software, laptops, and technical equipment. But what's unique is actually your IP. And your IP is something that don't depreciate over time. The more you use it, it increases the value, actually. So I see also recognize this. IP rights are not just protecting the business itself, but they're helping them grow. So I'm very strong at protecting IP assets for your startup as early as possible and as smartly as possible, because a lot of people think that protecting IP is very cost and legal and boring procedure, but if you do it at the right time with the right steps, it could definitely leverage your valuation and help your business grow.
Relja?
I have to take the opposite point of view. I mean, I agree with you that you should protect your IP just because that is the world we'll live in. But I find that most software IP is actually hurting the industry and is just not helping us innovate. Having submarine patents from 10 years ago surface on a shopping cart, but on the internet, that's not doing anybody any favors, right? So I'm very much in favor of a reform of effectively the use patent system when it comes to software IP rights. And I think you're correct in the sense that is something that startups should be doing. But I think it's if we're going to chart out a path forward, I'd much rather see more of the technology itself, let's make it have it be open source, and the thing that's actually value is how you do your business, who your customers are, and so on. I'd much rather have an Uber that is an Uber than somebody patenting, I can order a cab using an app, right, which I don't think is that useful. But again, I love arguing about these things, so maybe we'll have a good over-beer conversation later.
Definitely.
Yes.
Borko, if I
Dusko,
may,
please.
I take a bit longer time to process questions, to think it through. So if we are talking about inflation related to FDI, I mean, inflation is a very complex macroeconomical thing, but surely I would say that in the first place, inflation didn't start because of FDIs coming to the country. The inflation, first of all, it's global. Second of all, it doesn't have to do anything in any way to FDIs coming to the country. I think that FDIs definitely are something that we should strive for and we should look forward in attracting to. However, what I would maybe change about the way FDIs are coming to the country is that I would try to retain a bit more of value from the FDI. So it's very different story if a foreign factory comes here and opens a 2,000 workplaces factories, and in that factory there are 1,980 labor workers, don't get me wrong, and 20 engineers, compared if the company comes and employs 1,000 engineers and 1,000 labor workers. So I think we need to rework a bit of our strategy in attracting FDIs.
Clear, thank you. I couldn't agree more. And for the person asked the question, I'm a former economist, happy to discuss after the session. But now I will close the session. Thank you for the panelists. I really hope that they motivated some of you to go after global markets. And that's it. We're moving to the last session. Thank you all.
Thank you for hosting us.
Thank you so much.